Hi everyone, Jiju here. Welcome to Commonsense Economics. This video is about why should a common man learn about inflation and what are the steps individual can take to control inflation. We have seen what is inflation in my earlier video. Now my question here is, can an individual actually control inflation in an economy in any way? It is done by RBI or central bank, right? Very true. RBI or central bank of any country for that matter is primarily responsible for monitoring and controlling inflation of that economy. But central banks intervene in inflation only when it reaches to a certain level. Before that, every individual has equal chance of controlling inflation. This is where our discussion revolves around. Before we get into that discussion, let me tell you, you cannot completely wipe out inflation from an economy because a certain level of inflation is actually good for the economy. This we will understand later. Let us first examine what is the impact of inflation on common man and why should common men learn about inflation. I would say housewives are better judges of inflation because they understand the price changes instantaneously. Inflation, in fact, reduces the purchasing power of common man, which means the price of everyday goods increases. It also erodes the value of your investments, which means the amount that you get at the end of the investment tenure will not be sufficient to meet your long-term goal. In this context, two questions are relevant. First one, you get salary increment every year to reduce the inflationary pressure. Will that take care of the price hike? Second question is that you get interest or growth on your long-term deposits. Will that take care of the value of your investments? I will answer to these questions with some statistics. The answer to the first question is yes. Salary increment is to take care of the inflationary pressure, which is actually good. But how many are benefited? Statistics says that almost 90% of the employed population in India is in the unorganized sector, which means they are not getting proper increment in their income. The average salary increment for the organized sector for the last 2 decades was 8.5%, whereas the average wage increment for the unorganized sector in the last 2 decades was just 2.6%. In the meantime, average inflation in India was 5.85%, which clearly indicates that organized sector employees were able to manage the cost because their salary increment was above the inflation rate, which means they are gaining 2.65% net increment in their salary. Whereas in the unorganized sector, they are actually getting a net loss of 3.2%, which is inflation adjusted. If you look at the 8th pay commission, we are expecting a 30 to 34% hike in salaries of government employees, which is actually good. But who are the beneficiaries and what is the size of the beneficiaries? Which is merely 1.1 crores out of a population of 145 crores. So there is huge income inequality there. Now it is evident that who are mostly affected because of inflation. Now coming to the second question. We get interest on deposit. Will that take care of the value of our investment? That was the question. And the answer is not exactly, because it all depends on which instrument that you invest. If you select bank deposit as your long-term investment option, then interest rate fluctuations may affect your long-term savings, because the maximum tenure of bank FD in India is 10 years, and after every 10 years you may need to renew, and at that time what is the prevailing interest rate, you may need to invest in that particular interest rate. So that is about the investment return. Now the most important question is, what are the steps that we can take to control inflation as a common man? There are in fact 5 things a common man can do to control inflation at their level. First one is budgeting. Every individual or family should have a proper budget so that they can plan their financials well and they can control their spending. An ideal budget should be 50% of the total post-tax income should be spent on essentials or needs such as food, housing, transportation, etc. And 30% of the post-tax income should be spent on non-essentials or wants such as entertainment, dining out, etc. Remaining 20% should be spent on savings or repayment of debts. Now second point is upskilling the unorganized sector employees. Why it is important here? When we upskill the unorganized sector employees, some of them may be progressed to the organized sector employment so that their income will be streamlined. When they were in the unorganized sector, their income was low, so they resort to more debts. An increased Personal debt can lead to a rise in consumer spending in the short run. Initially, households borrow money to spend for goods and services. If it is a gradual cash flow, they will still spend, but the spending will be planned. So here, government bodies, political parties and social organizations have a lot of things to do to upskill the unorganized sector employees. Third point, control discretionary spending, which is purely a behavioral change. We need to avoid unnecessary spending. Fourth point, spend time on purchase. Why? Because when you spend time on purchase, you can find a lot of alternatives for the same good, a cheaper alternative. So do that. Please spend time on that. Fifth point, please take bill for all purchase, because this will prevent lot of unaccounted money flowing in the market. So broadly, these are the 5 things that you can do to control inflation at your end. Hope you enjoyed this. If you like this video, please subscribe and share it with others. Till the time we meet again, bye bye.